You look at your belly in the mirror and see only an aesthetic inconvenience, something that keeps you from wearing the clothes you like or that makes you feel uncomfortable at the beach. But have you ever stopped to think about what is happening inside your body right now, at this very moment, while you are listening to me? The naked truth is that your abdominal fat is not just dead weight or a passive storage of energy. In reality, it is an extremely active chemical factory, producing substances that circulate through your bloodstream 24 hours a day. It is literally talking to your brain, your heart, and your liver, dictating the rhythm of your health and how quickly your body will age today. Modern science has discovered that the fat accumulated around your waist functions like an independent organ, but an organ that works against you. It produces inflammatory toxins that keep your system in a constant state of alert, blocking your fat-burning ability and sabotaging your energy levels. Today, I'm going to take you inside this microscopic factory so you can understand the independent life of your belly. We will discover why it is so difficult to eliminate it, and most importantly, how to deactivate this ticking time bomb before it causes irreversible damage to your metabolism. Hello, I'm Dr. Harrison Blake. I'm a medical specialist. And in 15 years of medical practice, I've learned that to win the battle against the scale, you must first understand how your enemy operates from the inside. If you want to stop fighting in the dark and regain control of your biology, you are in the right place. Go ahead and click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. I want to understand my body. In 15 years of medicine, I have noticed that most people make the mistake of treating all fat as if it were the same. But for your metabolism, there is an enormous difference between the fat you have in your arms and the fat you have in your belly. To make it easier to understand, imagine that your body has two types of storage systems. The first is subcutaneous fat. This is a fat located just beneath the skin, the one you can pinch and make that famous roll. Although it may bother you in the mirror, from a medical perspective, it is relatively harmless. It works like a thermal blanket and a long-term energy reserve. The real problem begins when we talk about the second type, visceral fat. This fat is not on the outside. It is on the inside, hidden behind the wall of muscles in your abdomen, wrapping around your liver, kidneys, pancreas, and intestines. And this is where science changed everything we once believed. In the past, we thought fat was simply an inert storage depot, like an energy backpack you carry on your back. Today, we know that visceral fat behaves like an endocrine organ. That means it functions like a gland, similar to your thyroid or adrenal glands, producing its own hormones and chemical messengers. The difference is that while your healthy organs produce substances that maintain balance, visceral fat produces substances that create chaos. It releases hundreds of bioactive compounds into your bloodstream that alter blood pressure, change the way you process sugar, and even interfere with blood clotting. When you have excess visceral fat, you don't just have extra weight. You have an inflamed gland weighing 2 or 3 pounds operating in the center of your body, sending incorrect signals to the rest of your system 24 hours a day. That is why you often see people who don't appear extremely obese, but who have that prominent, firm belly. Doctors call this visceral obesity. This type of fat is far more dangerous because it is metabolically active. It does not want to sit quietly. It wants to interact with your entire system. It hijacks hormonal signaling and forces your body to operate in a constant state of metabolic stress. During these 15 years of practice, I have seen patients with normal weight on the scale who had so much visceral fat that their blood markers look like those of someone with morbid obesity. Understanding that your belly is a living and dysfunctional organ is the first step to changing your strategy. You don't simply want to lose weight to look better. You want to treat this organ so that it stops sabotaging your heart and brain. The focus shifts away from aesthetics and towards shutting down a hormonal power plant that is operating out of control. To understand what happens inside your belly, imagine that each fat cell, what we doctors call an adipocyte, is like a storage balloon. When you consume more energy than you burn, these balloons begin to fill. The problem is that visceral fat cells have a limited capacity to expand. When they become too large, something dramatic happens. They begin to press tightly against each other, and the blood and oxygen supply reaching them becomes insufficient. In medicine, we call this tissue hypoxia. Imagine a room where the oxygen is running out. Panic sets in. Inside your abdominal fat, this suffocation causes the cells to enter extreme stress. Some of them cannot survive and eventually die. When these cells die inside the fat tissue, your immune system is called in to clean up the mess. Macrophages, defensive immune cells, infiltrate the fat to surround the dead cells, forming what we call crown-like structures. What was once simple fat now turns into an inflammatory battlefield. It is in this microscopic war zone that abdominal fat begins releasing its most dangerous weapons, pro-inflammatory cytokines such as TNF-alpha and interleukin-6. Think of these cytokines as chemical sparks that leave your belly and fall directly into your bloodstream. Because visceral fat is strategically located at the center of your body, these sparks spread rapidly to all organs. This is why excess belly fat is directly linked to joint pain, chronic fatigue, and even brain fog. Your body is not just tired. It has tried to extinguish a fire that never goes out. This constant state of inflammation is what rusts your arteries and your pancreas. The cytokines travel to your heart, where they irritate the lining of your blood vessels, facilitating the formation of cholesterol plaques. They also travel to your pancreas, where they interfere with insulin production, preparing the ground for diabetes. In 15 years of clinical practice, I have seen many patients try to treat high cholesterol or high blood pressure only with pills, without realizing that the command center of these problems was a hidden inflammation deep inside the abdomen. The most frightening part is that this cellular fire alters the very biology of fat itself. An inflamed fat cell becomes stubborn. It loses its ability to release energy efficiently. That is why the more inflamed your belly becomes, the harder it seems to lose weight, even if you eat very little. The fire blocks the metabolic pathways responsible for fat burning. Your body is so busy sending immune cells to your belly that it forgets how to use that fat as fuel. Many people feel bloated and heavy, and that is not just food in the stomach. It is edema, fluid the body retains in an attempt to dilute those inflammatory toxins. When you understand that your abdominal fat is literally on fire, you realize that the solution is not just any restrictive diet, but a strategy of anti-inflammatory healing. If we do not extinguish the cellular fire, the body will never have the peace necessary to open its energy reserves and burn the excess. Your belly stops being an aesthetic problem and becomes an internal wound that needs healing. To understand why it is so difficult to stop eating when you have abdominal fat, we need to talk about leptin. Leptin is a hormone produced by your own fat cells, and its function is noble. It travels to your brain, specifically to the hypothalamus, to say, "Boss, we have enough stored energy. You can stop feeling hungry and speed up metabolism." In theory, the more fat someone has, the more leptin they produce, and the less hunger they should feel. But in reality, people with large bellies often feel constant and intense hunger. Why does this happen? The problem is that when abdominal fat becomes inflamed and excessive, it produces so much leptin that the brain begins to close its ears. Imagine living next to a train track. In the beginning, the noise bothers you, but over time your brain ignores it so you can sleep. That is exactly what your hypothalamus does. It becomes deaf to the signal of satiety. In medicine, we call this leptin resistance. Your body has plenty of stored energy around your waist, the equivalent of hundreds of meals. Yet your brain believes you are starving because the signal of fullness has been blocked. This is hormonal hijacking. You just finished lunch, but an hour later you are already looking for a cookie or a piece of candy. It is not a lack of character or discipline. It is a chemical short circuit. Visceral fat creates a state where your brain panics, believing that the reserves are empty. As a response, it decreases your energy expenditure, making you feel lethargic and unmotivated, and desperately increases your search for dense foods, especially refined carbohydrates and fats that provide a quick dopamine spike to compensate for the discomfort caused by cellular stress. But the hijacking does not stop there. There is another crucial hormone called adiponectin. Think of it as the cleaning crew of your metabolism. Adiponectin protects your arteries, helps burn fat, and increases your sensitivity to insulin. It is the hormone of the lean and healthy body. The problem is that as abdominal fat increases and becomes inflamed, adiponectin production drops dramatically. The cleaning stops, metabolic waste accumulates, and your cells stop responding properly to insulin. You enter a permanent storage mode. In 15 years of clinical practice, I explained to my patients that fighting the hunger of leptin resistance using only willpower is like trying to hold your breath underwater. You may succeed for a short time, but biology always wins in the end. The only way to regain control over your appetite is to reduce the inflammation in abdominal fat, so that the brain can hear the signal of satiety again. When leptin resistance decreases, compulsive hunger disappears almost like magic. Visceral fat also interferes with the conversion of sex hormones. In men, it produces an enzyme called aromatase, which converts testosterone into estrogen, reducing libido and muscle mass. In women, it contributes to estrogen dominance and polycystic ovary syndrome. In other words, your belly is literally altering your hormonal identity, changing who you are and how you feel in relation to the world. Understanding that abdominal fat acts as a chemical hijacker is the first step towards stopping the blame and starting to address the root cause of the problem. To understand why visceral fat is the number one villain of your health, we need to look at the map of your circulation. Unlike fat under the skin, the fat surrounding your abdominal organs has a direct connection to your liver through a highway called the portal vein. In 15 years of medical practice, I explained to my patients that everything your belly produces goes straight to your main filter without passing through any toll booth. When your visceral fat cells become inflamed and overfilled, they begin to leak. They release free fatty acids directly into this portal vein. Your liver, which should be busy filtering toxins and producing vital proteins, suddenly becomes bombarded by a massive load of fat coming from your belly. The result is what we call hepatic steatosis, commonly known as fatty liver. Your liver cannot process all of this, so it begins storing the fat inside its own cells, becoming swollen and inefficient. But the damage goes even further. This visceral fat overload forces the liver to produce more glucose and release more particles of bad cholesterol, VLDL and LDL, into your bloodstream. That is why so many people with abdominal fat have high triglycerides and low HDL, the good cholesterol. It is not only what you eat, it is what your belly is injecting into your liver 24 hours a day. This process generates hepatic insulin resistance. Your liver stops responding to the signal that blood sugar is already high, and your pancreas must work twice as hard, producing even more insulin to compensate. Because insulin is the main storage hormone of the body, chronically high levels act like fertilizer for visceral fat. It is a perfect vicious cycle. The belly overloads the liver increases insulin, and insulin makes the belly grow even more. That is why the hard belly that many men display, thinking it is muscle or just a high stomach, is actually a critical warning sign. That rigidity comes from the pressure of visceral fat pushing against the abdominal wall, and from the swelling of inflamed internal organs. In 15 years of clinical practice, I have seen that heart health begins by controlling this route. If your liver is under attack from belly fat, it starts producing inflammatory proteins like C-reactive protein, CRP, which travel to your arteries and initiate the processes that lead to heart attack or stroke. Abdominal fat is not an isolated deposit. It is the epicenter of a multi-system failure. If we do not cut off the fat supply entering the portal vein, no medication for cholesterol or blood pressure will solve the problem at its root. Understanding this geography of disaster is essential to realize that losing belly fat is not vanity. It is a natural metabolic surgery. When you shrink that fat, you take the weight off your liver. It begins filtering your blood correctly again, your insulin levels drop, and your body finally exits the emergency storage mode. The liver route may be the pathway to disease, but it is also the pathway to the fastest metabolic recovery when you make the right decisions. The first step to deactivating the inflammation in your belly is what I call signal cleaning. If your fat cells are suffocating and releasing inflammatory cytokines, the last thing you should do is add more fuel to fire. That means drastically reducing refined vegetable oils and processed sugars, which are the biggest triggers of visceral inflammation. Replace them with foods rich in polyphenol, such as extra virgin olive oil, berries, and green tea. These compounds act like cellular fire extinguishers, helping shrink fat cells and improve insulin sensitivity. The second pillar is a strategic use of intermittent fasting, not as a form of calorie restriction, but as a tool for autophagy. When you give your body windows of time without food intake, you signal the organism to perform an internal cleanup. The body begins recycling old proteins and reducing the inflammatory pressure inside visceral fat tissue. In 15 years of clinical practice, I have seen that fasting helps reset leptin receptors in the brain, allow you to feel real satiety again, and stop being a slave to the emotional hunger triggered by belly fat. The third pillar, and perhaps the most powerful for shrinking visceral fat, is strength training. Many people believe they need to run miles to lose belly fat, but science shows that resistance training is far more effective at changing the chemical message of your body. When you train your muscles, they release substances called myokines, which travel to abdominal fat, in order to stop producing inflammation and start releasing energy. Active muscle is the greatest antidote to diseased visceral fat. Additionally, focus on nutritional density. Your body will only open the fat vault if it senses that the rest of the organism is well nourished with essential vitamins and minerals. Magnesium, zinc, and B-complex vitamins are fundamental for your mitochondria to burn the fatty acids your liver is trying to process. Without these nutrients, fat leaves the belly but remains circulating in the bloodstream, increasing your triglycerides. Deactivating this ticking time bomb requires patience and consistency. You do not inflame your cells overnight, and the healing process also takes time. But as you apply these strategies, you will notice something wonderful happening. Your energy returns, the brain fog disappears, and that hard belly begins to soften. You are not just losing weight. You are healing a diseased organ and restoring peace to your metabolism. We have reached the end of this deep investigation into what really happens inside your abdominal fat. I hope that from today forward you will never again look at your waist merely as excess weight, but as a living organ that needs care, anti-inflammatory healing, and respect. Understanding that the belly is a chemical factory changes everything. The focus shifts away from obsessive calorie counting and toward restoring your hormonal and cellular health. When you decide to apply the cleansing strategies we discussed, you are not just seeking a defined abdomen. You are freeing your liver, protecting your heart, and giving your brain back control over your hunger. Abdominal fat loss is, above all, a biological healing process that restores your vitality and mental clarity. I'm Dr. Harrison Blake. If this deep dive into the functioning of your body opened your eyes to a new way of caring for your health, share this video with someone you love. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. I will deactivate the ticking time bomb. Your metabolism has an incredible power to recover. You just need to get the right signal. See you at the next level of health. See you in the next video.